Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. This is a meeting of the Council held in public. It is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the exit nearest the large screen at the front of the room. Proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it's safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We are recording this meeting this evening using our webcasting system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the council's website following the meeting. And as usual, all mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. An apology from Councillor Palmer with Councillor Davies as substitute. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. No one indicating any direct declarations of interest. Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of September 2024. All those in favour of those minutes, please show. Thank you. Okay. Abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. Right, straight on then to item 4, and I welcome Councillor Westwick to the meeting to report on his task and finish group, which is a very, very important document. A lot of detail on there. Good reading, and I'll leave it to you, Councillor Westwick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I am pleased to present on behalf of the members of the Task and Finish Group the findings arising from the review of the grass cutting and the current grounds maintenance contract. The review was established originally by the Overview and Scrutiny Commission following a request from the Chairman on regards to the review of the grass cutting and the grounds maintenance contract. Firstly, I would like to thank my fellow members of the Task and Finish Group for their contributions and the council officers who assisted in the group, and a special thanks to James Hendry for obviously being very informative indeed. So the Task and Finish Group held 4 meetings to review and discuss the existing grounds maintenance contract. The discussions mainly focused on identifying areas of improvement, desired additions to the contract, and clarifying the current responsibilities of the grounds maintenance contractors. From these discussions, as you can see from the report in front of you, the group reached a consensus on 5 key recommendations to enhance the contract. So I'd like to once again thanks to everyone that was involved, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for obviously appointing me as task lead for the Task and Finish Group.
Thank you, Councillor Westwick. The recommendations, so we know what we're talking about, are to explore options which align the Council's Pride team to complement the winter prune work undertaken within the grounds maintenance service both now and in the future. To request that the Cabinet Member for Environment and Leisure write to the equivalent of Essex County Council regarding the contract for grass cutting and spraying, and determine the level of grass cutting that should be undertaken by this council given the level of funding provided, and to request that spraying takes place early within the calendar year within Basildon. 3. To request that the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Enforcement write to the Office of the Essex Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner to understand any opportunities which may be available for funding which seeks to improve public safety or reduce fear of crime through enhanced amenity management. 4. To ensure that as part of any future communication plans, land ownership and service frequency / quality standards are clearly communicated. 5. To endorse the revised specification for grounds maintenance and the approach towards the future provision of the service. 6. Whilst recognising the financial backdrop for the Council, endorse any efforts to enhance the level of service provided across the borough. Right, it's now open for discussion. Can I just say, I read through the report and there were some options in there of the way the Council could go in the future, either a LATCO, in-house service, a new contract or whatever. You didn't come down to choose one of those, which did surprise me somewhat, but that leaves it open then to the Cabinet member to read the report and come to a decision, therefore, on that issue, which I think is important. Thanks very much. Right, who wants to come in? It's obviously such a good report. You all read it. Oh, Councillor Callaghan, didn't recognise you over there.
It's because I'm wasting away. Mr Chairman, just want to put on record on behalf of the administration a massive thank you to Councillor Westwick. It's very difficult when you're a brand new councillor to come into not only a task and finish group, but to chair a task and finish group as a brand new councillor. I think he did a really, really good job, and the piece of work that has been produced is excellent. And from the administration's point of view, it has given us a lot to think about as we think about the budget for next year and some of the options that we want to take forward in terms of procurement options as well. So thank you to Councillor Westwick and to the committee for the work.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Can I just say, before we continue, can I just say the piece in there which I find interesting is because when I was chairman of the Neighbourhood and Public Spaces Committee, we did start looking at the grass cutting for the County Council and how much money we got for it and what work we did. I'm glad to see you've looked at that also and made the equivalent recommendation to the Cabinet member. Councillor Baggott.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, having looked at the report, there's clearly a lot of work gone into it, a lot of thought go into it. So I would also commend Councillor Westwick for the approach that he's taken and the ultimate report we have in front of us. It's more a question of following it through, though, here, because there are 6 recommendations, as you said. The majority of those are all future actions as opposed to immediate actions. So what is going to be the mechanism now for this committee to see what decisions are made and how those recommendations come to fruition, and we get oversight in that regard?
Thank you, Councillor Baggott. I would hope with those recommendations that the relevant Cabinet member picks them up almost immediately and looks at those to see whether or not some of those can be implemented, the recommendations, which isn't on who provides the service, but on the level of service of which of those can be implemented from the next financial year. I would hope that's the case. I read through it and I think that option is in there. I don't think it is about the future, but there's a lot in the report about the current situation, and the current situation for this past year is what brought about the task and finish group anyway. So I'm pretty certain, and I'll bring the relevant Cabinet member in a moment, but I'm pretty certain that he's not going to sit on his hands and say, well, this is all for the future. It is for the future, but I think also for the immediate future. Councillor Baggott, you wish to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but, you know, let's look at option 1 to explore options. So at what point do the options come back to this committee? To request that the Cabinet Member for Environment writes a letter. So where do we actually close that off to say the letter's been written? To request that another Cabinet Member writes a letter. Where do we close it off to ensure that letter's been written? To ensure that any part of the future communication plan and service frequency quite clearly communicated. What is the action plan for actually doing that, and what are we going to hear from the comms team that it's actually being acted upon? To endorse the revised specification of grounds maintenance. I know that's something that the Cabinet member would eventually come back to us, I guess, at some point. And endorse the efforts to enhance the level of service, which is great, but again, when is the committee going to hear them? So there are a lot of things there that are recommendations. They're good recommendations. What I'm saying is the circle needs to be squared at some point, that this committee can close it off and say these actions have been followed through.
Thank you, Councillor Baggott. I'll bring Councillor McGowan in 1 second, but I feel that with the recommendations, if the Cabinet member acts on these recommendations quite quickly, which I think he will, then decisions will be made, I think, by the Cabinet at some stage before the end of the year, possibly, on what happens for the grass cutting or the terms next year. And I think the Commission's job then is to scrutinise what the arrangements proposed are. But until we know what the proposed any changes are, it's difficult to scrutinise. Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd also like to add my thanks to Councillor Westwick on a very good piece of work, particularly impressive for such a new councillor. And thanks for his enthusiasm on the subject as well. I know he's very passionate about it. I think Councillor Baggett's getting confused again. I think he seems to think that this administration is associated with inactivity. Well, you could probably accuse us of many things, but not inactivity. I think he's thinking of his own former administration there. You can rest assured that these work's already begun, to be honest with you. This is an area that we needed looking at. We're grateful for the recommendations that the Task and Finish group has come up with, but there's plenty of work going on, and we will bring it to Cabinet as soon as possible. In terms of, you mentioned the Essex arrangements, I know talks have already started with Essex. They could be difficult discussions, but they are going to be had. Thank you.
Councillor Westwick.
In regards to what Councillor Baggett is saying, sort of having a bit of a time frame, some of the things that are listed here, for example, spraying only happens in the summertime, so you've got a bit of leeway and time to be able to come up to some kind of agreement or decision. So I understand that, like you've said, you want the circles to be squared. However, there are things on this list that can have time, a larger time frame rather than something else being rushed through. So there is time.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Chair. If it is helpful for the committee, if you are minded to vote for these recommendations, I can give assurance that the 2 letters that are being asked for here can be written within the next fortnight and distributed to all members so that you can see them. So that can be a time frame that you can all be assured will be followed.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan, for that. Okay, anybody else? Councillor Ansell.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'd like to reiterate the comments from other members on the praise towards Councillor Westwick, someone who was elected for the first time only a matter of months ago, but has already led a Task and Finish group and produced a, dare I say, very impressive report. So I feel the people of Pitsea South East and the wider borough has a gem in Councillor Westwick. And I think it was also right to acknowledge the cross-party basis upon which this report has been produced. And the amount of ground that has been covered in the 4 meetings of the Task and Finish group, and I think it's only right that we look to bring services back in-house to give that greater level of accountability for residents in the services that they are provided. Again, I for one am very happy with the wide range of recommendations, which I think should reassure members and residents that meaningful action will be taken and the response to this issue will be thorough. And I think it's clear, I think Councillor Baggett makes an important point that there's a process to go through, and this is an important step. And we're looking to move to the next stage to make sure that, as I say, that meaningful action that the administration and the group is looking to take is taken. And I have no doubt that Councillor McGurran will get straight to work to see that these recommendations are implemented, and we've heard from Cabinet members and the Leader of the Council tonight that they are ready and raring to go. So, Mr Chairman, very happy with the recommendations and it'll be a pleasure to support them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ansell. Right, the recommendations are on the report. I read them out quite clearly at the beginning. Can I just say, first of all, for Councillor Westwick, thank you very much. I volunteered you for this, and you took it on. I did a sort of search around who's best qualified, perhaps, and I picked on you. You did a fantastic job. Well done. They are difficult, Task and Finish groups, but I think you produced a very, very good report. Can I just, on the recommendations, can I also ask that later on in the work programme we're looking at area committees. My view is there might be a role for area committees to look at perhaps grass cutting in their areas. They can have a budget, they may wish to pay for an additional cut perhaps somewhere if they need to. Just a thought. So on the recommendations, all those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Well done, Councillor Westwick. You don't have to stay. Right. Item 5, the waste consultation process. The purpose of this is not We're not looking at what the proposals might well be. This is here tonight. We are looking at whether or not we're scrutinising the communications of the road shows, so that is the information, was it produced in a good and proper way for the Cabinet member to make decisions on the future of waste. Mr Hendry is going to do the presentation. Are you ready? Well, I'm not sure what's happened there. I could assure you that wasn't me. There we go.
This one, not that one. Yeah. Okay, and a bigger feedback loop. So, yeah, thank you, Chairman. So, happy to present an overview of the recent consultation and engagement activity which took place over the late summer, which talks about some of the, really what we're going to go through here is the demographics and the reach, and to give members confidence in the results which will be presented to the Council's Cabinet in November of this year. As you'll be aware, Cabinet approved consultation on the future options for residual and recycling waste in July 2024, and a public consultation activity began on the 5th of August and finished on the 29th of September. Now, it was well received with 7,760 responses to the consultation, the majority of which were online. However, there were 13 paper responses which were completed within the borough's libraries and then manually uploaded afterwards. Now, included within those online responses are a number of responses which were, our teams, our recycling and engagement teams, were able to support residents in completing at physical roadshows, and I've got some detail over that later on. So I think the main takeaway from this is that as officers and as members, you can have confidence in the results which will be presented at Cabinet based on the level of response and where the responses came from and how the borough was represented within that. And this picture doesn't really come out too well from the results, but I think it shows you that there is a good wide spread of responses across the borough. There are no areas of real underrepresentation. Obviously, where that colour is darker and then turns yellow is where we've had a higher level of responses, but that is in line with population density. It's what we'd expect to see if we were getting a fair and consistent response and proportionate response across the borough. I will talk about some of the communications activities which took place. Appreciate there is quite a lot of information on here, but the communications campaign was built into 4 phases and then a kind of a wrap-up phase afterwards. Phase 1 was to say that the consultation is coming and to advise people that was this was when it was started. Obviously, that tied into the Leaders Facebook Live, which was periodically used throughout the communications plan as well. Phase 2 was launched, so there was a launch video which took place that generated the majority of our responses early on. 4 social media posts a week. The Commonplace platform was activated, which was where residents could complete the consultation, and the launch message which was sent had a 47% open rate. And resulted in 794 clicks through. So there was quite a lot of responses early on in the process. I think probably between 50 and 60% of the responses were in the first 2 to 3 weeks. So we kept using that, kept pushing that message out there throughout phase 3 of the engagement, which talks more about the roadshows, the opportunities for residents to come and talk to our teams, for any support that they needed with the consultation or anything else that they needed to take into account as well. We distributed some leaflets with the dates of the roadshows, the locations of the roadshows, provided a QR code which helped people to access the consultation exercise through smartphones and so on. The consultation itself was smartphone enabled, so it was easier to access and obviously make sure that the access was there for as many people as possible. There were a number of videos which took place involving Councillor McGurran as well over that duration as well. So there were Councillor McGurran in variously at roadshows, answering some of the FAQs which we were getting through social media or through the roadshows, and reiterating the importance of the consultation, marking the halfway point, and also I think at every public roadshow that we did, a member of the recycling team did a live to social media thing at the beginning of the day to say, come down to Basildon Town Centre. We are here from 10 till 2 today. We are talking about the consultation, and that did result in increased footfall at those days. And then phase 5 and 6 was towards the end of the consultation, which reminded people of the last opportunity to visit a roadshow, to remind people that the paper surveys were out there. Daily countdowns to the end, just to make sure that we were getting as many people to take part in this as possible, and the creation of a thank you GIF as well to highlight where people are taking part. Post the consultation, there was a general update on the council's social media, and Councillor McGurran was on BBC Essex to talk about the consultation process and to flag it up. So there's a wide range of communications which went on to support the activity. An example of some of the communications activities can be seen here. We've got the Commonplace platform, which is where the survey itself took place, which is a separate website to the council's website, but jumped off from the council's web pages. We have used that for consultations previously. There are a number of Facebook posts, graphics, videos, timetables, GIFs, physical banners, as you can see there, leaflets and paper copies available in the libraries. And if you see on the leaflet that's towards the bottom right of the screen there, the QR code, which I explained before, gives you a link to the consultation. So you can see the website banners on there as well, what the e-newsletters look like, but there is a consistency of branding and messaging across all of those media there. The next slide talks about some of the hit rates on some of those posts. So if you can see, the top 3 posts on Facebook had towards the beginning of the campaign, nearly 47,000 impressions with a reach of over 40,000, with 10,861 engagements. So that's all where people have clicked through to a link from the post. You can see the numbers across there, across the top 3, and the top 3 on Instagram as well. On the right hand side, you can see one of the videos from the recycling officer at the roadshow. Again, small but important numbers, but always helps to get the message out there and to amplify that. So you can see some of the numbers there in terms of the level of engagement and reach that each of the posts has, all to eke out and make sure we get as many responses as possible. The recycling team undertook 18 engagement sessions throughout the duration of the public consultation. They spoke with 809 residents and made sure that they were across as many parts of the borough as they could get to. Alongside that, they did reach out to all of the council's sheltered accommodation schemes, a number of community groups, parish councils, village councils that we've worked with before on previous consultations, and offered them to come out if they wanted us to go there. And that resulted in a couple of tea and talk type sessions with colleagues who look after sheltered accommodation, with residents who live within sheltered accommodation as well, to support and make sure that we were hearing from as many of our residents as possible, particularly those who may not have immediate access to the internet, either through the paper survey or through the roadshows. So I think that the credit's got to go to the team, particularly for a number of those roadshows which took place in the teeming rain, and my thanks go to them for making sure that the show still went ahead. They also joined some partner events as well, so where there were community safety events taking place in the town, for example, we'd make sure that we were pitching up there as well to try and reach residents that we might not otherwise have reached. So in terms of responses, fairly consistent with what we'd expect to be here. Where we have a blank means that the question was not, there was no information provided there. You can see we've got a good mixture of across the board of couples, families, single occupancies and larger families, as well as 0.3% of house share and HMO type properties. In terms of the property type, now this one does need updating because it doesn't include semi-detached houses are included within this. Semi-detached houses make up about 27% of the responses, but again there is a good split across the board of the types of housing that we get people responding from. I think that we know that converted flats and flats are slightly higher than that, so there is a slight underrepresentation in terms of respondents from those within flats. However, flats receive a weekly residual waste collection, so we were always expecting that to be a slightly underreported element of the population, but I think that is worth noting in terms of there's a slight underrepresentation from those within flats. In terms of the demographics and age responses, pretty consistent across the board. I think that chimes with what we've seen previously, but again we can have comfort in the figures that we have had a broad section of our community responding there. Again, there were a large number of people who chose not to complete this response, and you'll see that in the 1,500 responses who chose not to submit an age, but otherwise fairly good response across the board and representation from all age groups. In terms of postcodes, as highlighted within the initial slide presented, fairly representative here across the borough. There is no part of the borough that did not take part in this consultation activity. We had representation from all areas of the borough, and I've just tried to simplify this down to the first part of the postcode to highlight where we received the responses for, but there, I think the first slide that I put up shows a kind of a much more detailed spread across the borough, but you have got general postcodes here. Again, a representation seen from all across the borough, and fairly equal, allowing for some of the population changes, but fairly even when that's weighted. In terms of gender, 46.1% identified a female in the responses. I think that's worth highlighting there, that we were probably slightly overrepresented from the female population here, but we also did have a fair chunk of people who had no response to this, so 26.92% didn't submit a response for the gender question at the end, so that is a quick run through the demographics. In terms of the next steps, the full consultation results will be presented to the Council's Cabinet in November, with the options to be reviewed and decision on the future direction of services to be taken from that point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hendry. Anyone wish to come in and comment? Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things that jumped out at me. The first was obviously the number of paper responses, given it was so low at 13. Is there a saving if we were to stop doing paper responses? If so, are we talking hundreds, thousands? That would be the first question, because it doesn't seem like as much of a value case if there's only 13 responses with 8,000 responses overall. And I was really pleased to see that on the age front we seem to be able to capture people that were older, which is always the concern around paper responses. Second question, just around, and I know this committee last year asked this question as well. Will there be the opportunity to look at the data in an unfiltered form, so the raw data? I know that when central government carries out consultations, that information is available to download, and I was just curious to know if that was going to be the case with this consultation and indeed with other consultations going forward.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of a financial saving, it's more of a diversion of officer time. Obviously, it takes more time to print. The costs of doing it are small, but it's obviously each of those 13s has to be manually entered. So I think that the number of responses and the number of visits we got at the road shows more than happily captures the more hard to reach communities, particularly where recycling officers have been saying to, knowing that we might have lower internet reach within perhaps our sheltered accommodation scheme, perhaps with some of our community groups. It's about going out to them, I think, rather than necessarily leaving a pile of paper things in a library on the chance that people stumble across them. You're right, I think that the getting the QR code helps. A lot of people are smartphone or tablet enabled. The way that the consultation is presented is optimised for those devices, and it is much easier to follow than it would have been in the past. So it is designed for that, and I think we have to trust our residents, that the majority of our residents are digitally enabled, but making sure that the support's there in terms of the roadshows and that sort of things was, so they reached 809 people through the roadshows alone. That for me shows the value of making sure that we are listening to our community where they are, rather than necessarily listening to, waiting for bits of paper to come back in. In terms of the question around...
Just to clarify then, the 13 responses, that's just purely the ones that came back through the library, and then you had sort of a further 800 that came through the roadshow. And did those people respond sort of via the app while they were physically at a roadshow, or did they fill out a paper questionnaire at a roadshow?
I think that's worth clarifying. So the 13 paper ones were what came back from the library. At the roadshows, our team spoke to 809 residents, some of which they were able to help support with the consultation there, but some of which just said, "Oh, I wasn't aware of this. Can I take a leaflet and do it at home?" So it's more awareness than necessarily completion.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking that there was only 3 sheltered housing schemes that actually had people go around to talk to them from that report? And if there was only 3, why did you pick those particular 3 rather than sort of every sheltered housing scheme?
Mr. Hendry.
Am I on? Thank you, Councillor. So, as ever, we have a good link in with our sheltered accommodation schemes. Our teams reach out and offer the sessions to all. The 3 that you saw were the ones who took them up on the offer. So, if more would have taken us up, then we would have been out to more. But it's more a case of if those sheltered accommodation schemes perhaps didn't have a community meeting during the life of the consultation, but they were available. I think they've reached out and messaged everybody who was on the mailing list. They've been out to them previously. They'll continue to engage with them, but it was only the ones that took us up on the offer of a visit that they visited. It might be a case of some sheltered accommodation schemes saying, what, we're okay, we just have a poster or something instead. But the offer was given to all.
Councillor Baggott.
Mr. Henry, congratulations to your team. It's certainly a thorough consultation, which is what I expect from your team, and they do work hard, so thank you for that. Can you just tell me, though, what the total cost of the consultation was, please?
Mr. Hendry.
So I don't have that information to hand. Everything was done within BAU, I believe, with the exception of the Commonplace platform. I think that this is all direction of officer time, but the Commonplace platform is something that the council subscribes to for a number of consultation activities. So I believe this was included within that package. So I think everything was within BAU and existing resources. But I'm not aware of anything specific. We purchased Commonplaces. So Commonplace is something the council subscribes to, so there was no additional cost for that.
Well, there's no additional cost. I just wondered what the cost was itself. And I don't expect you to necessarily have that information to hand, but if maybe you could let me know at your convenience, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baggott. Mr. Hendry. If there's no one else at the moment, we need to say something about the report. The recommendation to note the report and welcome the level of the borough-wide participation in the consultation. It's a good consultation, as Councillor Baggott has indicated as well, and from that I'm hope the relevant cabinet member will find the information and given by the people who've taken part in making decisions. Do you wish to come in, Councillor McGarren?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Yeah, just a few things to say, really. I mean, first off, it'd be remiss of me not to thank James and his team and the comms team as well, who had to put up with filming me on a monotonously regular basis. So they showed great patience and creativity at times. But yeah, no, I mean, in terms of consultation, it was important that we did it. And it was important that we did it right, and I think we did do it right. We probably expected a good response, but I think we were a little bit taken back by the sheer volume of the response, particularly in the initial couple of weeks. It was phenomenal, and like I say, as James has already said, we did do our very best to reach everyone possible across the borough, and I think, again, you know, that the results, if you look at postcodes and the heat map, etc., it does show that the take-up was very good across the borough, and obviously all the road shows reflected that as well. You know, we went to, you'll be pleased to know, Councillor Harrison, we went to Wickford several times with the road show, so we did, you know, and all the towns of the borough were visited regularly, so no one was left out. In terms of Councillor Barnes's point about the paper responses, I mean, it's an interesting one, because in a way, there's a certain irony here, I don't think it'll be lost on people, that there was quite a bit of social media noise about the absence of paper survey forms from libraries. And so in an effort to make sure that absolutely everyone was reached, we did do that. But as Mr. Hendry said, before, you know, before that, a lot of work was done so that like people could turn up at road shows, be helped do the survey. People also could ring the council itself, talk to a staff member who would do it for them. So even people who are not digitally included were not excluded from the process. We did do as much as possible to reach everyone. I think the results show that, and like I say, the hard work has started since then as well. So again, James and his team deserve a lot of credit, and we will be bringing a report to Cabinet this month. But I would like to thank, like I say, James and his team and the comms team, because we did. I think we genuinely did everything we could to get the message out there that what this consultation was happening, how to do it, and why it was important.
Thank you, Councillor McGarren. If no one else, do you wish to come back? No? Okay. Recommendation is to note the report and welcome the level of the borough-wide participation in the consultation process. Okay, all those in favour, please show. It's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Right, we move now to item 6, Basildon Town Centre East Square Cinema. There's a report there on starts on page 103. Can I say first of all, I have indicated this already, the work programme, the purpose of it being on the work programme was to examine and scrutinise the financial decision making and total cost to the council of the cinema in Basildon Town Centre, together with details of potential return on the investment, to include any initial advice received from external consultants prior to the start of the project and any legal advice sought at any time from the start of the project to date. I read it because that isn't mentioned in the report as to why the report was asked for by the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. So the report is there. I've already indicated to others, I think it's a lightweight report. I've had difficulty looking at all the background papers referred to cross-reference between various committees, various etc., etc. One area where perhaps some officers can advise me is that the only CMDR referred to is the one by the then leader of the council when Empire Cinemas became insolvent or whatever. Having read through some of the other stuff, I get the impression there probably were more CMDRs, cabinet member decisions, between about 2021 and 2023, but there's no reference to those in the report anywhere. So I'm just worried about that. So to the officers, I would be saying, could you show me what spending was agreed by CMDRs versus what was actually spent on the cinema purchase between May 2021 and May 2024? If there were any CMDRs, it's difficult to assess from the background papers referred to. So that's where I'm coming from. I do note that the Resources Scrutiny Committee is also examining the cinema. I think there's that next week or the week after, I think. So that's where I'm from. So anybody else wish to come in on this, first of all? Any questions to officers? Very quiet, very quiet. Councillor, well, I was trying the members first. The members, I'm just looking at them, there were no comment. Councillor Callaghan then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think to give a bit of context as to sort of why the report is the way it is, then obviously there's an element to which we are in part one, so we don't want to necessarily jeopardise the council's commercial position. If members want to go into some of that, we can, of course, at your discretion, go into part two, but that's a conversation for the committee to have. Clearly, this report sets out, since 2012, over the last 12 years, the history of how we got to where we got to on the cinema. It concludes just before the election of 2024 with the decision by Cabinet on the 14th of March to award a capital contribution to the preferred operator. Now, I think I don't like passing the buck, but what I would say is that obviously that was the previous administration's decision. It wasn't something that this administration was empowered to oversee or to make those decisions. All I would say, you obviously have clearly asked a questionnaire about the CMDRs and whether or not the CMDRs match the amount of money that was being spent. That is obviously a question that either now or at a future committee we may be able to come back to you with. The officers can bring those answers to you. I think from my administration's point of view, clearly there are issues around the credit agency rating report of the operator that perhaps were or were not properly scrutinised by the Cabinet. It was a big sum of money to go out the door. Whether or not that was properly scrutinised by the ONS Commission at the time, I'm not entirely sure. But again, I understand that sometimes decisions have to be taken quickly, but how that works, we're not sure. As things stand at the moment, there's no indication of performance, so we haven't got any view on what performance has looked like in the opening quarter for the operator. I think it's pretty questionable in terms of the additional footfall that it is bringing into the town centre, particularly evenings and weekends, and some of the other operators, some of our other tenants who are operating in the F&B space in that part of the town. Again, we haven't got any data or any view, I don't think, at the moment about the impact that the cinema is having on their custom and their footfall. And one of the things that I have asked for is the legal position to look at what happens in various different scenarios going forward, because again, I don't think the way in which that contract was put together necessarily gave this council the flexibility that it may need going forward. So again, I find myself in the odd position here of being the leader of the council, but at the same time perhaps giving you suggestions of areas that I would have asked questions about if I had been in your position 6 months ago, but perhaps we need to be thinking about in more detail going forward. But obviously I will take your lead as a commission as to how you want to proceed on this.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Anyone wish to come in? Right. Can I just say on the report, the only mention of any funding is the £3 million recently and the 20-year lease. That's the rest of the report. I'm assuming it is this confirmation of due process has been carried out by officers. I'm not suggesting that hasn't happened. So in the light of that, I would like to move that following consideration of the report and confirmation that due process was undertaken in the decision-making process of the development of the East Square Multiplex Cinema, I asked the Overview and Scrutiny Commission to request that when the Resources Scrutiny Committee look at the performance of the View Cinema investment, they also review value for money for the council, because they are looking at it. I think, is it next week? Is it?
We're discussing when that's actually going to come forward to.
Okay. On that, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I think that's a good suggestion. I would just like to unpack what we are going to be looking at, what the remit's going to be for that committee in terms of how we're going to decide if something has been value for money, in terms of footfall, private profits, what's going to be the metric, and are we going to get a definitive answer, or are we going to get something fluffy and woolly and not really an answer?
Oops, I can't answer that, Councillor Brown, because I'm not sure what the full remit is to the Resources Committee, but I'm sure that the Chairman of the Resources Committee will make note of what's coming out of the Commission, and I would hope listen and pick up the points made. I'm sure officers will make sure that happens. Okay? Councillor Barnes.
No, just to sort of echo that point, I mean, clearly it's going to be very, very difficult for any committee, as I think this committee's found tonight as well, to ascertain the value in something if you can't see the numbers. So whatever report they take, if it has to be in part two, then we may need to ensure that the chairman's aware of that and make sure that the report gives them the information they need to reach the conclusions that you want.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I was going to add is the report does outline on page 109 that the cinema complex, that building, is a circa £25 million investment in terms of the council own that. That is a building that we own. So it was a £25 million investment, and the 3 million that has been referenced is in relation to kind of fitting out and getting an operator through the door to start. So you may have a view as to whether or not you are questioning whether or not 3 million is value for money or whether circa 30 million is value for money.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. I think that's another point that the Resources Committee, under their chairman, will pick that up, and we'll see what comes out of that Scrutiny Committee before we decide whether it needs to come back to the Commission or not. So on that basis, that the question I've asked about CMDRs, someone will pick up with some answers.
Just for confirmation for the committee, the CMJRs that were actually made are all referenced in the report, or any others?
But you'll let me know if there's a difference between what I said was it's the difference between what was agreed by CMDRs and what was actually spent.
We can look and confirm that, that's fine. We can probably just do that directly to yourself, Chair.
Thank you. So on the recommendation I read about the referring to the Resources Scrutiny Committee, is everybody happy with that point? Yes, if so, we'll have a little vote on that. Do you want to read it again? Do you need to read it again? No, we don't. Right, all those in favour then, please show. Thank you. Unanimous. Okay. Right. Before I go to the regeneration update, can I pick up item 8, the Basildon Town Centre management one? First of all, while we've been talking about the Basildon Town Centre, and I'm just trying to pick up who's dealing with that one. Is it Councillor Callaghan again, isn't it? Thank you.
Yeah, so we are agenda item 8, yeah? BTCM. That's what you want to talk about? Yeah, okay, cool. So the report in front of you sets out pretty much the same report that is heading to Cabinet on the 11th of November. Members will be aware that back in 2019, the then Town Centre Revival Committee made it really clear that one of the kind of perverse consequences of the Development Corporation when it ended in the 80s was that, unlike in so many other new town areas where lots of the land and building was adopted by the council and given over to the council, in their wisdom the then government decided that Basildon was too radical for that to happen. So in the end they created a Quango, which has become known as the Basildon Town Centre Management Group, BTCM. So we have a lot of land, and I think this is always something that the public are surprised about when we talk about it, that when it comes to things like car parks in the town centre and the public realm in the town centre and the market, for example, in the town centre, this isn't something that Basildon Council actually owns or has much control over. BTCM are the partner that are in control of that. I've always thought that that was a kind of a ludicrous situation to be in, and that the council should try and find a way of working through bringing those assets back into public ownership. So again, the Town Centre Revival Committee started looking at this the last time I led the council, and we are now in a position where we are, it's taken too long, far too long. It's been caught up in legals over covenants and other bits and pieces, but we are nearing a conclusion, and what I will be saying to the Cabinet meeting in a couple of weeks' time is that this needs to be concluded by January 2025. We need to be in a position where the legals are done, the decision is taken, and the transfer can start to happen. That will have a massive impact on things as we talk about the market. We talk about what we will get onto in a moment, the kind of the plans around the urban greening and the lighting that we are putting forward in the town centre. All of those things are impacted by what we do with BTCM and some of the options on sites coming forward, the car parking, all of that sort of stuff. It will be impacted, and it will give the council, and through the council, the public, greater control over those assets. So where we are, as I say at the moment, is the last 3 years, not a lot has happened, but we are, we hope, in a position to near completion on some of these legals. There are covenants on some of the lands. They are different in some areas, so we are having to work through that. I don't know if any officer has anything you want to add to that, but I think broadly, broadly that is where we're at, and we are hoping that we are in the end zone for this now.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Can I just ask one question? If the council in effect takes control of BTCM Limited, is it then an arm's length company of the council, or is it a separate entity?
So that is not a decision we've necessarily taken. So although we would be in control of it, whether or not we have it as an in-house asset or whether or not we run the company itself, that's something that we haven't taken a view on at the moment.
Thank you. Anyone wish to come in on this? Councillor Baggott.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's not often I agree with Councillor Callaghan, but on this particular one I do. I think that it has been a little bit perverse in a way that a lot of the council's ambitions in the town centre have been hampered by the structure of BTCM. So progressing it, I think, is the right thing to do. I think where the devil in the detail is, though, is, and you've just alluded to it, Chairman, in a way, is the structure of it going forwards creates a potential capacity issue for who the directors would be. Would they be existing officers, or would we need to recruit existing people to be the directors? The roles of the employees remaining on the books of BTCM, what happens with regards to issues like, for instance, 2P, pay scales and everything else with regards to the structure of the new arrangement. And also, I guess, the the overall shape that it then takes place going forward. So I think that it's the right thing to do, the right direction, but I do think there are some questions. I do wonder whether or not there is a role for audit and risk to be looking at the risks to the council for any decisions that are made, and maybe those risks should come back to overview and scrutiny to actually complete the picture.
Thank you, Councillor Baggott. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to be clear on my previous answer, there are, as Councillor Baggott has alluded to, there are issues that we would have to work through on things like TUPE and pensions and that kind of stuff, because there are staff that are currently employed by BTCM. There's also a kind of, again, I think quite perverse arrangement in terms of the percentage of land that is in BTCM land, that therefore those owners have voting rights on certain areas of the town. So it was a weird kind of formula where basically if you own the East Gate, you have over a 50% say in everything else that goes on. So again, we're looking at how we can kind of change some of the constitution of that. But the long-term aim of this, to be really clear, is that, you know, the assets, the running, the operation of that will come into Basildon Council. How quickly that can happen is up for debate. But I think, you know, we seem as a commission to all be on the same page that this needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Can I say I think it's important that this council does proceed with this. That is important. I agree with Councillor Baggott. Councillor Callaghan's also, I think, highlighted where the areas there may be problems. But I think that as this moves forward, it will be one item which may well come back to the Commission when a decision is made into how it is actually going to function. Because if you look at the report, it does infer that it will remain as a limited company, but then you identify the risks and etc. in doing it, the cost to staff, etc., etc. So I think that it's almost, yes, proceed, but we will have to be watching how you proceed at a later date.
The only thing I would add, Chair, is just obviously the council does have a number of companies like Acorn House, like Sempra, that it is running at any one time. So it's not an unusual structure for the council to operate in.
No, thank you, Councillor Callaghan. I accept that that may be the best way forward, but it's then looking at how it actually works, because there are staff who work for the company at the moment, etc., etc. So on that basis, that the Commission welcomes that this proceeds. Is everyone happy with that? And that as it is finalised, the report may well come back before the Commission as to how it will be operating to scrutinise. Is everyone happy with that? Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now pick up the regeneration update. I moved it here to the last item, not the last item, the item before the work programme. Should it be necessary to go into part 2, I hope it won't be necessary to go into part 2, because we cannot be talking in part 1 about anything that may be commercially sensitive. So, Councillor, who's going to do this? Councillor Callaghan.
Yep, thank you, Chairman. We are just sharing a presentation on screen. While we do that, can I just say thank you to you, Chairman, and to the Commission for allowing us to do this. This is called filibustering, by the way, what I'm doing right now. But thank you to the Commission. I'm used to, the last time I was here, having a committee system where we could come and talk about all of these things on a regular basis. So it makes a welcome change to come here and to talk about all of these different projects that the Council has got off and underway. I want to start with the Wickford schemes that we are working on. No. Technology.
It's not playing right. I know, yeah, it's really slow. It's not.
It's just taken a little while, but so as you said, we are we're not in a position to go into too many commercial details. If the committee wants to, we can of course go into part 2, and I can talk about some of that.
I've got the, it's not a presentation, it's a problem.
We passed the watershed. If we take the first one, which is the old co-op site and the car park site, I've said since I've been back in May that I think outside of what we're doing in Basildon, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a moment, I think that this is the most exciting site in terms of regeneration that the council has to play with. For the benefit of those who perhaps have forgotten through the passage of time, we had a deal in place with a supermarket operator back in 2021. And as part of that, there needed to be upgrades to our car park. And in order to help us fund those upgrades to our car park, we had made a decision as a council to sell Gibraltar Walk. And that was a part of the town that was going to become a care home. And the funds from that were then going to go into the improvements to the bridge between the Wick and the car park, and then our car park site itself. For some reason, having passed in the January of 2021 a decision to dispose of that site and to put those funds in, the then chief executive refused to sign the deal, and it never happened. And so as a consequence, 5 months later, we were in a situation where those funds were not available to the council. As a result, in the years that have passed since, that supermarket operator has walked away from the deal. So we've missed the opportunity there to regenerate that car park and to improve the co-op site as it is. Over the course of the sort of 2019 to 21 period as well, the owner of the co-op site changed hands. That is a company that the council has worked with very closely in order to try and bring development forward on that site. We've done a lot of economic analysis through our economic development team, looking at the kind of the pounds and pence around that site. And it is clear to me, as I hope it is to the committee, that we should be ambitious for that site, because there is money, there is wealth in and around that area, and therefore we should be thinking about what we can do to match. And I would give two examples: a high street offer that Billericay has, but also the high street offer that Rayleigh has. And that is our ambition for Wickford in terms of what we want to see. Now again, I keep using this phrase in all of our regenerations: whether it is midday or midnight, it has to offer our residents something. It has to offer businesses something. So again, since I've returned, we've been looking at this site. There's been lots of coverage in the press and in Parliament about potential operators going into that site and doing things. As things stand at the moment, there is no plans coming forward. Again, as a council, we hold quite a large say in what happens, because any development on the old co-op site needs our car park. We should not, in my opinion, we should not give up our car park unless it is for a development that is the right size, the right scale, the right offer for the residents of Wickford and the surrounding areas. So we've got quite, we have an idea based on some of the work that our internal regeneration and architects have done around what is the art of the possible on that site. I'm obviously not going to go into that right now because we're in part one, but we have entered into negotiations with the owners of the co-op site around what they've paid, what is value, what we can do. We've had Montague Evans do a Red Book valuation on the site to look for value for money, all of that sort of stuff that you would expect us to do. So we know in our heads what the site is actually worth, what is the kind of long-term value of the site. And those negotiations are underway. These things don't ever happen quickly, unfortunately. I wish they did. But the good news is, if we can find a way through those negotiations, and it might be that we end up doing this as part of a joint venture, and we work with the developer or the owner at the moment to develop something out. However we structure how we take this forward, there are some outline plans that we have for that site that we can take forward that would give people of Wickford far more than just the kind of high-rise flats that they've been used to over the last 15 years of the developments that have gone on in the town. We need an F&B offer, we need a better public space, public realm offer in that town centre, and I would quite like a car park that has car parking spaces that fit cars in 2024 and not KAs, because not everybody drives a KA. So that is something else that we need to look at. I also think on this site, this is the gateway site into Wickford, and it has been really poorly let down by the fact that the gateway, the route in, the journey you go on off the roundabout into the town centre is pretty poor. How you then get from the car park into the high street is pretty poor. There's not much in the way of wayfinding. There's not much in the way of good lighting. So all of those things need to happen. Now, we're obviously constrained as well here by the railway and the Crouch, which runs alongside the site, and that throws up some issues that the planners need to contend with. But even still, it is a priority area. So we, as an administration, this is something that we keep asking about all of the time in terms of how we can bring that forward. The other site that we own is the Wickford Police Station site. So we purchased that when we were in the last time. We could bring forward a scheme on that site right now. But the truth is, in order to get more value, we need to look at the ambulance site behind it as well. You know, again, not to try and play politics on this, but in 3 years, nothing happened on this site. So we've had to pick up these negotiations again to start running with that. We were close in 2021 to getting a deal done on that. We are where we are. We're having to restart those conversations because not a lot came forward. What goes on that site and what we can do with it, there are a range of different options that are dependent on where we are. And I think one of the things that the administration is going to have to make a decision on in 2025 is, if we can't get the ambulance site, then what do we do with it? Because we can't keep a derelict police station there in our ownership in perpetuity. I'd love a police station to come back, but as we all know, that is not going to happen. Essex Police are not keen on doing that, so it will have to change use and it will have to be something else. Quite what that is, we'll have to go into consultation with the public on, but I'm hoping that we might have the whole site as part of that scheme. Do you want me to stop there on Wickford and take questions on this one before we move on? Yep.
Well, thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Just on the main one, the co-op site, you said there was no planning applications in and nothing happening at the moment on that at all. Okay. You mentioned about the problems of the River Crouch nearby, etc. I speak from some experience here for when in a career on the railway, when you either built over the railway or you built over rivers. Can we not build over the Crouch? There, we can't do that. It's all right. Just a thought. Christine's going to tell me why.
Obviously, if it sits within certain flood zones, then you're not allowed to build. If it sits within a flood, and this sits in flood zone 2, so we're not allowed to build on that. You can, well, not all of it, so part of it. We can have ground floor commercial though, upper floor residential. So if you're in certain flood zones, you can have the ground floor has to be non-residential. So we may get away with the part of the site being non-residential, and therefore we can build on that.
Thank you. On the police station site, is it owned by the council or Sempra? I know the council bought it, but I thought it is Sempra. When we get to the Basildon regeneration, are you going to talk about the proposed ambulance site there? So is it still that one there? Is the one at Wickford dependent upon the other one still taking place?
No. So they're two different sites, annoyingly. The conversation with Wickford is still ongoing on so whatever we do with the Nevermain shouldn't impact on that.
Okay. Anyone else wish to come in? Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. I'm just commenting really. I think am I close enough to the mic? Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to comment. You know, if you're not familiar with Wickford, that roundabout there is an absolute nightmare. I mean, Trying to get into the car park. If you miss that turning and decide to swerve, you're risking you got to go round and round and round again. I completely agree that roundabout may need part of the development, and also I just also like to agree that the car park there has to remain. Really, I mean, how will shoppers park there? How are you going to invite trade into that area? There are, as far as I'm aware, mentally, there's no other car park in that area, unless they'll start parking on resident streets, which I don't think they'd be too happy about. So that car park also has to remain in any potential future plans, and to revitalise the Wickford High Street and bring trade into the shops and the market. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come in? Councillor Barnes.
Well, perhaps Councillor Callaghan can respond to me as well when he sums up. But it was just really a question on sort of timescale. I appreciate there's nothing on the agenda now, but do you have an idea of sort of timescale in terms of the development of the co-op site? Do you have a preference? Do you have a target in mind as to when you're going to have something concrete?
I have a preference. Whether the officers do or not, I'm not sure. Let me deal with the Mayor's point first. I think I agree. Right, we have to keep the car park. That's our strong hand in this. Whatever we do, however we configure it. But I do think there is the potential to look at how we swap land. So whether the car park, which currently sits to the is in the right place, I'm not convinced it is. I think actually when you come off the roundabout, if you're creating a better gateway into the town, perhaps the car park should be in front of whatever comes. So there might be a conversation, and I don't want to go into the negotiations that we're having, but that might be something that we're talking to them about at the moment as well. Because I do not want to. I appreciate that we need probably need a supermarket in Wickford. There obviously is a brand new Aldi that has opened not so long ago. Our economic analysis is showing that a lot of people in Wickford shop at the Mayflower Retail Park, and that they're well serviced by the Mayflower Retail Park. Obviously, in the local plan that's coming forward, there'll be ED land, there'll be economic development land that may be suitable for a supermarket as part of the local plan, who knows. But I definitely don't believe, if I'm honest, in terms of Councillor Barnes's point, I don't believe that is the right site for a supermarket. I think that needs to be a better offer for the residents of Wickford than to take up that whole space with just a supermarket, particularly, I have to say, one that isn't at the highest end of the retail market, given what we know is the demographic there. In terms of the timescales, as I said, I think in 2025 we've got to make a decision on what we do with the police station. But we've got a series, and we'll talk about it in the other towns. We've got a series of planning milestones coming forward for developments coming to planning committee. I would hope that at some point in 2025 we're talking about Wickford being in one of those planning committee meetings. But until we are over the line in a negotiation, or we've agreed a JV, or however we're going to do it, we are not in a position to bring a planning application forward at this stage.
Right, thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Anyone else on the Wickford one? If not, we'll move on to Langdon.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And I should just say as well that I'm happy to come back whenever you want to talk about regen here. So if there are more conversations that you want to have on this, then I'm happy to do that. And thanks, members, for allowing me to keep that in part one. In terms of Langdon, the issue we had back in May when I took over was a highways bond issue. So the shopping centre, nothing has happened on the shopping centre for 3 years because of a highways bond issue. So when you are as a developer, and obviously committee members, you'll know this, but more for the people who are watching, when you are about to do any regeneration, any development, and you're going to start having an impact on the highways, on the roads, on the pavements, you have to agree a fee that you are going to pay the Highways Authority for the repairs as and when that happens. For whatever reason, it took best part of 2 years to get to a point where Sanctuary, who now own the development and who are bringing the development forward, could get an agreement with Essex County Council. I don't understand why it took that long, but it is another example of why we need to leave the county council and become a unitary authority. That's something that should have been dealt with, in my view, in a couple of weeks, but it took nearly 2 years. When we came back, we were really keen that we needed to keep the pressure on the county to get that highways bond issue solved, and I'm pleased to say within the first 6 weeks of us being back, it was solved. So the agreement was signed, and the roadworks have begun on that site. There might be some changes that the developer might want to come and bring into the second and third phase of this scheme. Obviously, the idea behind this is a little bit, I wouldn't say outdated, but things have moved on since the development was passed. So particularly when you look at what's going on around the back, we need to get to an agreement over the GP surgeries. Where is the health centre going to go? Could they go into, obviously Swan was supposed to take the office block as part of this, as part of their plans, but they no longer exist. So we've got a kind of an office block sat there. Is that something that could be turned into the health centre? Is that the right floor space, right footprint for them? Those conversations are going on. Or is that something that needs to now be converted to residential as part of the development? So there's a few nuances that need to be ironed out in the scheme. But the good news is they are on site, they are building. It will take a couple of years to get to a point where we can start moving people in. But they are also talking to using an agent to look at some of the retail space and some of the retail unit, because they've got, I think, 15 shops on this development that they've got to fill, so that they're starting those conversations. And what I'm keen to do in all of this, whether it is in Basildon, Langdon, or Wickford or wherever, is make sure that we have a joined up approach to who those retailers are. What we don't want is the towns going into massive competition within each other. We need to have retail offers that complement and suit each other. So there's a reason to go to Langdon, there's a reason to go to Basildon, etc., etc. And so those conversations are ongoing. The Langdon Library, if anyone's been past it recently, you'll see it's looking good now. So the landscape in the public realm has been, or is nearly done. It's going to be complete by the end of the calendar year, but it's in a pretty good shape already. So finally, things are happening. I would expect, as I say, there to be some amendments coming to planning committee at some point when Sanctuary want to do that. The public should not be alarmed. That does not mean that it's all stopping and falling over itself. It is just part of the process. But the building is carrying on. So happy to answer any questions on these two schemes in Langdon that anyone might have.
Okay, anybody wish to come in on those? Okay, you may move on to Pitsea.
Okay, so Pitsea. So members will be aware that last week we exchanged with the NHS on the CDC. There was a little bit of nervousness around the change of government in July, because obviously the previous government times three, Prime Minister times three, Boris Johnson, when he was the Prime Minister, promised 42 brand new hospitals and things which, as we all know, didn't actually exist and were never going to exist. And so some of the funding for the CDCs had been kind of caught up in that pot within the Department for Health. So we were a bit concerned as to when the Labour Party came in and said, here's the truth about what is and isn't going to happen on the hospitals, whether or not Pitsea CDC was going to happen. But I'm pleased to say that thanks to the work of our officers, we have secured that funding, and we are in a good place on that. So that is progressing, moving ahead. It's been through all of the planning process. The activity centre has moved to the Wat Tyler. The pensioner activity centre has moved to the Wat Tyler. The library is almost out to Vange, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that is now happening, or happened, I should say. So demolition and construction can start early in 2025 on this site. So a positive. We estimate it will be around a 200,000 person footfall per year going into Pitsea. The market is thriving, it's doing really well at the moment. What's really annoying about Pitsea is that we don't own an awful lot of it, so therefore our ability to then kind of take that 200,000 people and boost what goes on in that area is quite limited. There's another bloody McDonald's going on that site that we've seen, and again, we don't have the power to stop that. But again, you know, it's positive that things are happening in Pitsea, and the CDC hopefully will be a facility that is used. There's different. Am I right in saying that? There's different floors to it, so there'll be some community use in that building as well.
Floor.
Yeah. So the ground floor will be. Sorry, there's so many of these projects. I have to try and remember which one's which. The ground floor will still be open to the community use. So the pensioner club should come back, and the public will still have access to it. It won't just be a NHS facility that no one can go into. It will be open to the community as well. And as you can see from the visuals and the CGIs, it is a much better looking building than the existing one. So that will help as well.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Anybody wish to come in on the Pitsea one? Councillor Callaghan did mention that Pitsea was thriving. On Sunday morning, I had to go to a place in Pitsea for a scan on my shoulder. I think half of Essex was trying to get in their vehicles into Pitsea on Sunday morning about 11 o'clock. The place was at a standstill. Every road, the A13, the roads coming off from Basildon, all around the town centre in Pitsea was at a standstill. And it was like that for about an hour. So something must be attracting them to Pitsea. Pat Reid is now going to tell us what it is.
The market. You said the library is, people are now going to Vange. I thought that it was decided that there would be a mobile library in Pitsea as well.
Yeah, so I'm advised that our colleagues at the county are reviewing the need for the mobile library. So as county councillors, that might be something that you wish to press the library team at the county to look at. Obviously, it would be great if we could get a mobile library there as well as part of the plans, and that may be something that you know, I might, if the Pitsea members were so minded, I could write to the county as well to request that. But happy to take direction from the Commission.
When I went to the handing over, Councillor Mark Durham was there, and he actually, who is a county councillor, and he asked me where the mobile library was going to be situated, and that's where, and I said I wasn't sure. So maybe you could.
So the correct answer was to appoint it at something that said there, so he'll do it. So okay, well that's something that we need to take away, and we'll confirm with the cabinet member.
Okay, anybody else on Pitsea? Otherwise, we'll move on to Basildon Town Centre. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Chair. So the last time I was here, bar one, I think it was to talk about the Westgate and the acquisition of the Westgate, which we said we would come back to you with a plan on. So since we have done that, we have appointed the architects, so the master planners, I should say. So they are busy at work on those 3 sites that you see at the West End, all of which is now under Basildon Council's control. So we have Westgate Phase 1, Phases 2 and 3. We haven't labelled 2 and 3 because we're not convinced yet which one will become 2 and which one will be 3. Depends on a number of factors that are coming forward. But our intention is to get a planning application for Phase 1 to the Planning Committee for May 2025. So that is now starting to happen. You will have seen, if you've been walking around the town centre, that we have taken the old Easy Gym as was, and we have converted it into a very, very cool, quirky event space. And we held a session back in the start of October with investors, developers, landowners in the town centre, to talk through what the art of the possible might be, to convince them to keep their money in Basildon, to keep investing in Basildon. And so there's a new brand that you're starting to see, the purple, that's gone around everywhere, Newgate. And it's all based on the principle of Basildon being established in 1949, 75 years on, and what can we do with it going forward. So as I said to the committee previously, obviously we can't, as a council, be involved in absolutely everything. What you're seeing on screen there is a kilometre of land and the various different businesses and owners and all the rest of it that are in it. Last time I was the leader, we started off with 55 different landowners in that town centre, which made it a jurisdictional nightmare. We've started to reduce that significantly. Part of that has been acquisitions we've made, but also acquisitions that some others have made. And we've got some really, really good relationships. So I think members will know that Galliard Homes now own the Eastgate. They're engaging with us really positively. Clearly, the application, the outline application that was previously submitted by Infrared, that's off the table now. That isn't something that we're going to be taking forward. We're rethinking what we do at that Southern A long riding end of the town, but working with them has been really, really helpful. We're looking at some meanwhile uses. So there's some really cool meanwhile uses happening on things like Toys R Us sites around the country at the moment. So we're talking to some of the people who do that. But our focus from a development perspective will be at the west end of the town. That's where we're going to make our interventions. That's where the council is going to take forward our plans. And it will start with that phase 1 of Westgate. I think I've said it publicly, so I'm not prejudicing anything. We need a better retail offer in our town centre. We need to attract people into the town on retail. And we also need hotel space in our town centre. We don't have that in Basildon Town Centre. I think the last time I was here I said we're the only town centre not to have a Nando's. Well, we fixed that. And I now say we're the only town centre that doesn't have a hotel. So we need to fix that as well. So that is coming forward as part of phase 1. Within this development, I've also been quite keen that we've learnt the lessons. We've done a lot of work looking at what has happened in other town centres. And we know if you look at somewhere like Coventry as an example, you can't just build flats and then expect that the flats then generate footfall, that then generates retail space, occupancy and interest. You have to have something else that kind of pulls people in. Now, the officers will not want me to say this, but I am going to anyway. We need the South Essex Arena in our town centre. That multi-purpose event space coming into the town centre is a massive draw. When you start to look at, and we've done some economic development analysis on this, when you start to look at the pool, both in terms of Basildon, the borough, bringing money into the town centre, but then wider, looking at the South Essex region as a whole. If we don't do it now, somebody else will, because it's a real earner for your businesses, and it's a real way of boosting the town centre regeneration. So we're looking at where we phase that in. We're looking at whether that is part of phase 2 or phase 3. Members asked me last time I was here about the finances and how we keep the kind of the annual rent roll going. That is part of what you will start to see in what is on there as phase, I'll call it phase 2, next to phase 1 to the left. Which is where you've kind of got the kind of old Laura Ashley, JD, Sports, Dreams, that kind of block. We need to keep the occupancy of those up in order to create the rent roll, in order to help fund what we are doing for the rest of the development. So you'll start to see some of the new occupants going in there throughout 2025, and we're signing contracts on shorter periods of time, not 20, 30-year leases. They're shorter leases than that. But we are signing some leases there to get those occupied and to keep the revenue coming. That end of town, realistically, is a 15, 20-year project in terms of being taken from now to completion. Opposite is the Market Square development. So that went to planning on the 2nd of October for some of the changes of use on the stairwells. That is now done. The last man standing in that development is Greggs. There is now a deal in place for Greggs to move, so that is going to happen. It will take about 3 weeks, I'm told, for the fit out of Greggs to move, and we are looking at one of the pavilion sites for that. So where you've seen the hairdressers and the Costa, they're the 2 pavilions. We're looking at Greggs going into one of them, so it's still at this end of town. But there's a 3-week fit out for that. Once that has happened, then there's vacant possession on that whole block. And we are looking at the demolition of that to begin, I'm going to say, to put pressure on January 2025. Yeah, so we'll start to see that hoarded this side of Christmas, and then that will be demolished in early 2025. What's up in the top right-hand corner there is the Great Oaks scheme, the Donard Home scheme. So anybody who's driven down Broadmain will have seen now that has been demolished completely. So the old Staples car phone warehouse site, that has all been demolished, and looking to start construction on site there again in 2025. The hospital that was due to go into the Debenhams, which stalled slightly, we believe now that is back on track, and so that should work should begin on that pretty quickly in 2025 as well. And then we are working with partners on some of the other sites. We own a few things as well, and I said to you both at this committee and I said in full council as well, we might want to take a view now as a council about whether we dispose of some of those sites, because we've kind of, it's served its purpose. It's stimulated the development in some of these other areas. It might be now that we want to dispose of them in order to generate activity from the private sector in some other areas. So we own the Icelands block, for example, down to the town centre. It might be that if Galliard do something, we might want to go in with them, or we might want to. These are conversations that are now starting to happen. There's areas here that we need to tidy up, but again, going back to the Wickford example, this is about making that Westgate where we are sat now it's a horrendous building. Let's be fair, because it blocks out the whole entrance to the town centre. So we need to rethink at that end of town how the public see the town centre. And I do think having a kind of an iconic building at the end of the town really would put us on the map to show us in the right light. I don't know about you, but I got very, very excited 2 weeks ago on my first day back after paternity leave to drive down Nethermain and see a crane in the sky up at Chapelgate. I was on the train into London yesterday, and I've got even more excited because I'm seeing blocks appearing out of the ground. So they are making progress very quickly on Chapelgate. So that has been a derelict car park for 15, 20 years, and that is now going to provide much needed housing, 105 units, of which 80 of them will be council homes as well. So that is a real positive that is starting to happen. There are other bits to tidy up, Chair, around the ambulance site, so I can... let's go on to that next slide. I'll do it all because it's all relevant. We're looking at the public realm. So Cabinet is debating on the 11th of November an urban greening policy. So we're looking at putting more greenery into the town centre. The brutalist architecture as it is needs a bit of livening up with the greening. So we're working on that, and Cabinet will debate that as well. We've also got some money for lighting. So again, Cabinet has already looked at that. There's going to be some temporary lighting this side of Christmas. Obviously, clocks went back on Sunday. It's starting to get dark a lot earlier. So we're going to be getting some permanent lighting in from the start of 2025. Some temporary lighting in now, especially as we lead up to Christmas. We've got a big Christmas event. Save the date in your diary, 16th of November in the town centre. I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, you will be there pressing buttons and all sorts. So it will be a great event, and we're going to activate St Martin's Square for this. So we've not really used St Martin's Square before, but we're going to be doing it and focusing around here. So that is what's happening in terms of lighting and urban greening. There's some wayfinding, so you're going to see more signage going in around the town centre.
It's going in now.
That's going in now, even better. See, we're on it. It's happening already. So that is good. There's some information. Do you guys have this pack? Do you have this? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So there's some more information about the visioning event that we held going forward. Does anyone have any questions, Chair, on Basildon Town Centre at the moment? The ambulance hub, the update for you on the ambulance hub, the site we own at Nethermain, is that there was a covenant on that site that has now been removed, which should help move the development of that site on much more quickly. But there isn't a land swap deal in that, unfortunately. We would still need to negotiate that.
Right, does anybody wish to come in on the Basildon one? It's quite a comprehensive report by the leader. Everyone's reasonably happy at the moment. Councillor Brown.
I just have a general question. Your decision around what the town centre is going to look like is partly going to be determined by your understanding of some of the trends and changes. So one of them is homeworking, which is a big thing that's happened. And lots of people in Basildon are probably now working from home, and they're using things like Amazon and home delivery. A lot of people, I work from home for instance, get sick of the four walls of their home and they start to think of moving out of their home and actually finding a high-speed internet-enabled cafe or space or something in the town centre, and then they're not stuck in their four walls anymore, and they're opening to new. Now that's a vision thing. I only bring that up because that's an understanding of where you think the world is going, and I just wondered if you'd done that thinking, and that's partly informing your vision of how you're going to regenerate the town centre.
As part of the Market Square scheme, which the part of the site which backs onto the college, there's going to be a small WeWork area created there, sort of like that WeWork facility.
Could be
and,
another operator.
And yes, and or other operators. And also, I mean, you're quite right, those are sort of uses that we should be looking at within the town centre. There is currently a company that operates in the above where the bowling rink is. There's a small company that operates there at the moment. So we are starting to see them coming into the town centre. But of course, that's the use we want to see, because that, again, is that adding the activity from morning till night, isn't it? So you're quite right, we are pushing for those uses. And the closest of the town centre to the railway station is normally the places where people like to be, because you can then have clients come in from off the train and meet you. So the town centre is really set up for that sort of activity.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. I just add, I think outside of the residential, in all of the town centres, whatever spaces go in there have to be flexible spaces so they can be moulded and changed into things in the future in 10, 15 years' time. So not to dig anybody out on this, but if you sat there and you thought in 2012, let's build a cinema, right, in 2024 you probably won't open a cinema, right? So you would have probably looked at that site and thought we need to do something else with that £30 million space. My view is we could have done a hell of a lot more with that space than we currently have, but we're legally tied in. The other thing I think that we need to consider is, when you look at the residential that's going in, yes, we've got some houses on Chapelgate, and there will maybe be some houses at the southern A end as we take forward those plans. But predominantly, these are going to be flats in the town centre, and they are going to be either for young professionals who are wanting to move out of mum and dad's home, or they're wanting to move out of London because it's too expensive to live in London, but they can rent here or buy here and then travel in and out. Or as we see in the flats that we have in Trafford House or in Cherrydown in Nevermain, they tend to be older people who have sold up their home and they're looking to downsize, but they want to be within walkable distance of shops and amenities and GP surgeries and other things. So they're the two demographics that we're going to see in the town centre. So a lot of what we are doing has to cater for those people. And frankly, I always say this about regeneration. The reason why we've put regeneration, economic development planning all into one portfolio now is because the way regeneration is going to work, and we heard really clearly at the visioning exercise, is it's around how do you get people to spend their money. How do you attract people with disposable income to spend money in your town centre to keep those shops and those bars thriving and going along. I had a conversation just this afternoon with a business owner in Billericay who runs a bar on the high street. He makes all of his money on a Friday and Saturday. The rest of the week it's really quiet, it's really difficult, and then he tries to sell events and meeting rooms and that kind of stuff to generate some income. So there isn't the footfall and the demographic in Billericay High Street to be able to keep that going for 7 days a week. What we're looking at here is to make sure that the two demographics that are mainly going to occupy these residential properties, that they are catered for from midday to midnight.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that some local authorities, when they're looking at developing residential property, have put provisions in to make sure that existing local residents have preferences. Are there any plans in that direction?
Councillor.
On all our new developments, and that's not just flats, that's everything, there is a requirement that they have to be, for the first 3 months, marketed for Basildon residents only. And that is of any development that is allowed in our borough. So any general housing and the flats, they have to be first to go to Basildon itself, Basildon residents. And that's a must.
Councillor Callaghan.
Yeah, that was part of the Basildon First Charter that was introduced in 2021, which I know found its way into all of your leaflets in 2021 because you welcomed it. So that was something that we have safeguarded the borough for. So when we talk about Basildon residents getting first dibs, we should do that. The one thing I should also point out that I have not said so far, we have an event coming up in November called Meet the Buyer. These are events, we've already run one when it comes to Chapelgate with the Car Park 14 development. I am very, very clear that Basildon, Chippy, Sparkies, Brickies have to be in the supply chain to build these homes. These regenerations, wherever they are, all 5 towns, our businesses have to be at the front of the queue when it comes to procurement to get contracts in order to build them, in order to fit them out, in order to make them work. So we ran a session with the Hill Group, who are where the crane is, as you can see, where we were trying to get our businesses into the supply chain. We are running another one of these events in November at the new site. I talked about the old Easy Gym in the town centre. So if you, in your casework or in your post bags, come across any businesses that you think may be eligible to build any of these or to be in the supply chain for any of these regeneration projects, please do signpost them to the economic development team so that they can be added to the mailing list for these events, because it's really important. And I'm on these developers every day to make sure that they are getting our businesses to the top of the supply chain, so that so everybody benefits, and that the pounds being spent are for local Basildon businesses as well.
Right, thank you, Councillor Callaghan. You want to come back, Councillor Barnes?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned as you were talking that this is something that's going to take 15 to 20 years probably to deliver, and we all know that there could well be changes in the leadership of the council in that time. I know it's hard to believe, but it could happen. We could have, you may very well be, but in all seriousness, may very well not be. We might have a reform council, for example. Who knows? This may be a silly question, but is there going to be a document that an incoming leader of this council can pick up that is going to encompass all of this, so that it doesn't fall down the cracks when there are changes in administration?
I'll ask Councillor Callaghan to come in on that. I'd have thought there'd only been one answer to that.
Yes. The answer is obviously yes. I mean, I would argue all of this was on the table in May 2021. So there is nothing that we have put forward in any of these areas that I've talked about. Perhaps the CDC is a new thing that wasn't on the table in 2021. But all of these things that are on the table could have all been picked up when I left office in May 2021. And the reality is I have not reinvented the wheel here. I've not asked any of the officers to do anything that is remarkably different to what the previous administration in 2021 was looking at. The truth is, I don't know what happened in the last 3 years, other than not an awful lot, and we severely damaged business and private sector confidence in Basildon. Right? They tell me that on a regular basis, that they did not want to do business with Basildon. So I hope that, you know, we've sat here tonight. I've gone through all 5 of them. I'm not daft, right? Of course, not everyone's going to like it. I don't like everything, right? In all of these schemes coming forward, but I want us to have productive conversations with the developers, because I want to make sure that what they put into the town centre is the right thing. For example, I said just, I think last week or the week before, to one of them, you've got your planning permission, you've got that through, right? That's great, and that's now happening. Now come and tell me what retailers are coming into the bottom of that. So if I'm not going to buy a flat, or I'm not going to live in a flat in Basildon Town Centre, what is in this development for me? So start telling me who the retailers are who are going to be occupying those, so I know when I leave this building at lunchtime where I'm going to go to buy a lunch or go for a drink after work or whatever it might be. We need to move the conversation on now. I said it in the first speech I gave back in May, Councillor Barnes. I hope that we all come to this now from a view of, we made promises that we couldn't keep. We can't legally stop a lot of things that are going on. I don't have the power to do that. But we do have the power to persuade, and we do have the power to work, you know, positively with people, to get us to a position on all 5 towns where the regenerations are good, what we want. They're never going to be perfect, but get ourselves to good. I'm not hearing any dissent tonight from anybody in terms of what we're trying to achieve or where we're focusing resources or what we're trying to do. I'm sure I will read about it on leaflets 3 months before the 2026 elections, and you'll have to make a decision about what you do with that. But to all intents and purposes, we are talking about hundreds of millions of pounds of investment in Basildon Town Centre. So the schemes that are on that screen at the moment, and I think we really need to talk this up, right? It's about 400 million so far that is being put into the town centre across the Market Square and across the Donard Homes scheme. You then add in what we're going to do on Westgate, where you then add in what's already happened, 30 million on the cinema. You're talking about £1 billion easy that is being put into Basildon. So I would argue that these investors and these private sector businesses, they don't spend that kind of money on things that they think are useless ideas, schemes that are not going to work, that are going to be laden with crime, that have not got any long-term plans, that are ghettos, all that kind of stuff that I read about on Facebook on an hourly basis, right? You don't put £1 billion of private sector investment into something if you think that's what's going to happen. And I think all of us need to start talking that up. If we want that kind of money coming into Basildon, because Owen is not going to let me spend £1 billion, right? Because we don't have it. So we can't do this as a council on our own. We need the private sector. We need to work with them to give them the confidence to bring things forward. They've got to make a return. We understand that. But when you're looking at these schemes, whether we call it a master plan, whatever the document is, in the unlikely event I'm no longer the leader of this council at any point in the next 15 years, I will, on day one, pass that document over to somebody, because this is the reason I came back. I don't believe that this is the best that Basildon can be. We have to regenerate it, and I'll work with anybody and everyone to make that happen.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Can I just say on the Basildon one, I think it's important that we proceed, and what's going on is important. Can I ask that we're going to do the work programme next, but can I ask, first of all, thank the leader for coming, because I did raise the point previously with him that regeneration, without the committee structure, didn't appear on any agenda, and this is the best place for it to appear, so we can scrutinise what's going on. And I think we'd welcome you back in March for the next update, whereby some of the things you've started could well be at a much better stage. Would everyone be happy with that? Yep. Okay. Something out.
There was just one thing where I was about to tell you that we're doing the Essex Forestry Fund, and we're planting 170 trees in the town centres as well, just so you know.
I think they got lost amongst your other commercial. Okay, on to the work programme then. There's quite a lengthy work programme. If we just add for the March one, what I just mentioned, bring regeneration back in for next March. There's the forward plan for the Cabinet. There's a hell of a lot happening on the 11th of November. It's a very, very long Cabinet meeting that's going to be, by the looks of it. Is there anything that the Commission wishes to scrutinise, either after the decision making by the Cabinet? We can't really do it before because our next meeting isn't until December. Okay, otherwise, is there anything else to add to the work programme? No? Okay. So the work programme is as published, with the addition of regeneration in March 2025. Okay, I think that concludes our business for this evening. Thank you very much for your attendance, and look forward to seeing you in December. Thank you.